Anyway, though, to go back to sort of the Greg approach, let's go back to Pendragon, which is the thing that all of us have the most contact with at the moment. And I want to get at that the fact that it's not Arthuriana so much as mythic literary Arthur. Mm-hmm. It's that same thing. One of the people at the Patreon wrote that he sees Stafford as the only contributor to role-playing who got that the hero's journey is bullshit. It's not the hero's journey. It's what the hero is to the people that he comes from. It's the culture, it's the community, it's the impact, it's the meaning of it for them that is really the long game in these stories. And I think that I think Eric was absolutely right, that Greg really focused on that. The idea of relationships, community, the ability, and as in Pendragon, the ability to be it, but also to rebel against it, or to defy it, or to fail at it. You screw up. You murder your best friend. You triggered your cruel. GM says, yeah, your friend does this thing. Check your cruel. And you're like, here goes. I got a cruel of what? Scale of 20. And you've only got a cruel of 9. You're not that cruel. Then you roll your 3 and you're like, dude, sorry. Here it comes. And so and so the notion that that's one thing that RuneQuest didn't really capture. The excesses of the characters in the color text in Cults of Terror and Cults of Prax is extreme. The characters are right out of myth. They're full of extreme behaviors, grand gestures, and massive philosophical decisions, and berserk rages, and all that stuff. But there's nothing in RuneQuest that does that. It's got a couple of mechanics for like the cult of the Storm Bull, but they're all crazy anyway. So it's not, there's not that much to work with there. It was mostly reflected in commitments to a given cult. You had the Yomalians and the Humakti, who all had weird geases and things that they would and wouldn't do. It was actually the only place where that kind of not quite right behavior crops up in Glorantha, or in the RuneQuest material, is the implications of the spirits of reprisal. That every cult had a detailed spirit of reprisal for when you broke the rules or left the cult. And so, since it was such a pointed requirement of making up or using the cult in play, you kind of got the idea, and there was never anything about once you've committed, you can't defy it or break the rules, or it's not like alignment. It's not like you can't do it. This is what happens if you do. And they weren't actually all that bad. They were consequential. But I noticed one thing about the spirits of reprisal: they were all survivable. You could be scarred.
No consequences. You defeat or suffer the spirit of reprisal,
right?
And then you're done.
That's right. Yeah, you go and the stone fists of Orlanth come and pound you on the head a few times, and it's not very fun. But when you finally drive them off, you're done. Orlanth has had his say, and that's the end of that. Sometimes there's social consequences, like, certain cultures won't talk to you anymore, or something like that. But that's okay. There's plenty of places to go in Glorantha. And one presumes that you left it to go do something else. So that's the only place in there where I find the only place in the rules where being the excessive, problematic mythic hero shows up in RuneQuest. But it's all over Pendragon. I mean, it is all over it. My biggest temptation for playing Pendragon isn't the Arthuriana. and it isn't the realism. It's the crazy. But even that is embedded in what the culture thinks of you for having done it. Robbie, does that make any sense?
Yeah, because, in Pendragon, your character does not take an alignment. There is no alignment per se. Now
there's a couple of close equivalents, but not exactly. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, you're the presumption is that you are trying to accumulate glory, and glory gets kind of defined. To accumulate glory, you're supposed to be doing things that are honorable and showing loyalty and things like that. But he also has this other idea of reputation, right? That you can also,
that's right,
also establish a reputation.
You can have some glory, but a really big reputation. Yeah,
right. Well, or you may have a reputation for being cruel, right? That could be a thing, and I guess you could play a character that maybe you were grooving on the idea of being, the cruel one.
Well, in Mallory, there are plenty of knights who never achieve great glory, but who are plenty cruel and end up being main characters anyway.
Correct.
The other thing about it, I don't know, here's where we get supplementitis. In this supplement, it says, and in parts of Pendragon, in the base book that I have, there are 5 of the traits which are associated with chivalry. Mm-hmm. And it's given that those are the ones that your character at least believes in or has committed to culturally, even if they end up not being very good at it. That's where their zone is, and where everybody else's zone around them is. So the Code of Chivalry isn't. What they did was they gave 5 traits that were associated with other ethos that you might be committed to instead of chivalry, or might value instead of chivalry. So in those, it was those 5 traits that would build you, advances and stuff like that. And one of them was Christianity. The virtues of Christianity overlapped with, but were not the same as the virtues of chivalry. Another one was romantic love, and that was in one of the supplements that focused on romantic love for all of its little stories, and it had 5 of the traits that were very different from the ones for chivalry, which was on purpose, of course, because a knight who got all wrapped up in romantic love ended up being kind of a fuck up as far as being a knight of the Round Table is concerned, which makes perfectly good sense. And then they even had like the Saxon 5 and the Celtic 5.
The Botanic 5.
What was it?
The Botanic.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah, that would have been the Saxon one. Yeah. And so the idea that you could be playing, because one thing they kind of liked from Mallory is that people would join the Round Table from anywhere. Mm. So you could join the Round Table and kind of be into chivalry, but your heart's kind of still with the Botanic. I was under the impression they even had a Saracen one because of Palamedes, the Saracen knight in Mallory. Mm-hmm. But I can't find it. I was looking through my Pendragon books a little while ago going, wow, wouldn't it be cool to play all Saracen knights at some time? That would be really awesome. And I couldn't find it. But it would be very, very easy to put one together.
Those are the heathen religious virtues.
Right.
Saracens mix. Right.
No, that's correct. But they're clearly in there to be done, because it's also, since all of the characters have all of the traits, in the later versions, they fold in the options into character creation. In the earliest Pendragon, you played a Christian, basically Welsh knight. Done. And in the supplement Knights Adventurous is when they introduced the idea of playing off-ethnic and female knights. And it took a lot of work. I hunted down Knights Adventurous in some godforsaken, flea-bitten used bookstore, somewhere in Central California. And God, was it maybe even, could it have been Sebastopol? That'll give you an idea, of where you had to hunt this stuff down. But and even though everybody kept telling me, "Oh, don't worry, that stuff is in the later editions," I was a purist. I wanted that supplement. But I know that that's where they introduced the idea of coming from a different background. You could still be a member of the Round Table, but you kind of bolt your glory or bolt your concept of being successful in your values from a slightly different perspective than the standard. But again, though, it was axiomatic that even if you valued those 5 things, your own choices in the moment and whatever the GM threw at you to tripwire you, you could end up with a whole different set of check marks than you thought. You could end up with lust. You thought you were a good Christian to start, a good chaste Christian to start, but you end up with a lust of 15 after a few adventures. You're kind of like, ooh, look what I've been up to. What am I really like? And some of that wasn't up to you. Some of that was just the way the dice bounced on you. That was pretty gutsy. I'm trying to think of for a game in 1986 or 87 when Pendragon came out. Can anyone think of a game that did that?
The fun thing is that the personality trait predates Pendragon. You talked before about the Dragonute. It was so alien, so totally alien that no player character could play them. I think is one of the Dragon Footprints.
Right.
Once on all the supplements, they published optional system to play Dragonute.
Right, and that's the one I had in the Worm's Footnotes, and a lot of it was randomized. You're right, a lot of them had randomized features. I have that somewhere.
Then they looked at this system to play a totally alien Dragonute and said, oh, this could be used to play a Malorian knight.
Right. The DNA of Pendragon is hiding back there. That's true. And of course, I've talked in the past about roles to go berserk and stuff like that, the Enrage and Berserk and Champions and things. Those are there in many ways, but the idea that they are fundamental to playing this character at all and to be as nuanced as they are, you're right. The Dragonutes actually have that lurking back there in that material. That was the first one that actually they told you about how they were reincarnating in RuneQuest, but they sort of laid it out more philosophically in that. But yeah, you're right. Now after Pendragon, tons of games worked off of those. John Wick liked them a lot, so you saw them in Legends of the Five Rings. The other one that actually probably did it more directly was Fading Suns. Had the binary traits, although they were rated, I think, 5 to 0 to -5 or something like that. There was a smaller scale.
Unknown Armies, I think, too.
Yeah, Unknown Armies with its madness meters,
yes, sir.
Clearly, and so it clearly had a great big impact. And then, but that's the traits. Then you have those other things which are just your raw bonuses, right, Robbie? A third. I mean, if the dual traits have 2 ways to play them, you also have a completely separate personality mechanic in there as well, which is like hate Saxons 3d6. And so that's raw bonus. That's when, and you only get that for role playing it. You say, hey, I'm going after this Saxon dude. All right, give me my extra 3 dice. Here we go. So that's involved in there too.
Yeah, and I'm just struck by how many of there are 26 traits. I mean, there are 13 pairs, and then you have the passions, which are the
That's
things
what I was talking about, right?
And love. So, I mean, yeah, it becomes, incredibly complex. And, I would say to kind of play it well, I mean, you would have your hands full, right? Kind of looking at these to really kind of negotiate between. Yeah.
Sir Bernard is a real piece of work after a little while. And as I recall, you could get more passions. You can start new passions. So that's a big part of it too. If you want your character to be, all about this, the wife of this other knight or the wife of this manor lord or something, start it up, build a few dice in there. And that, even more so than the dual traits, that became an enormous influence on game design through the 90s. One can even look at some of the I was thinking, I don't know for sure. I'd like to re-examine Werewolf by White Wolf, the early Werewolf, which I have. I'd like to re-examine that for some of its fury-oriented material, just to see. But yeah, I mean, it's clear that somebody, I mean, it would have been wonderful to imagine what the conversations were like in the early mid-'80s while Pendragon is being written, or when people are doing things with RuneQuest that the rest of us aren't really seeing. Did somebody start playing RuneQuest characters privately behind closed doors with personality traits that gave passion bonuses, for example? I mean, Gordon, you could see how that would be just the easiest add-on ever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so there is at least one example of, in the midst of the tournament module craze, where what you got instead of the standard, kill and solve puzzles tournament, you got a personality profile for your character, and that's what you had to succeed at in the tournament, was meeting the personality profile of the character. I have no idea how widespread it was, but it was, I do remember early on, it was far more common that you would get your character more fully formed in that kind of a situation, rather than actually getting to build your character from scratch.
Well, you had to play it in that short period.
A bunch of information about it.
There was a Pendragon Pass, an hack of the Pendragon to play in Gloranta.
Oh, really?
It was published in one of the first of these fanzines, and got rather a lot of traction. There was a lot of people playing it in the old forums about Gloranta.
That's really interesting, actually. I didn't know much about that. One is heavily tempted to play RuneQuest in a Gloranthan context and port in a few, backport a few Pendragon features in. In Prince Valiant, the passions are evident. They're I forget what. You pick 2 of these many possible adjectives for the character. I can't remember if you had to balance them with disadvantages or what, but you ended up with a couple of sort of just descriptive traits about your guy. And you got bonuses, just got extra coins whenever you did them. I mean, it was that straightforward. You can probably see a lot of things in my game Circle of Hands, but insofar as it is a love letter to Magic the Gathering, it is also a love letter to RuneQuest and to Prince Valiant. So you can, once you know those systems, you'll see where I was happily mining them.